Hello, my friends, my very punctual friends who are joining right at, 9 o'clock my time zone, noon, whatever, top of the hour, wherever you are. Welcome. We are so glad that you're here. I'm going to go ahead and give it just a moment so that everyone can join us and get settled in. But while we're doing that, I just wanted to do some quick housekeeping. If you are here for tackling stress and anxiety strategies for resilient students, you are in the right place. We are glad to have you, and we'll be having a really good conversation today. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And as we are joining, I wanted to let you know, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the Q&A. My wonderful colleague will be monitoring that when I'm not talking. I will also be keeping an eye on it. But that is your way to communicate with us. I did promise I would share my screen. Give me one moment. Okay. And the other way you can participate with us today is with iClicker events. So there are a couple ways that you can do this. You can go ahead and just take a picture of the QR code and respond on your phone. Or if you prefer to do it in a web browser, you can do it kind of like Jackbox games, if anyone remembers those days so long ago, where you just type in join.iclicker.com and then it will prompt you for this 4-letter code. So I will give folks a moment to join us. Like, oh, look at you getting in here so fast. I appreciate that. Okay. While you are doing that, some quick housekeeping. This is being recorded. We will share out the recording to everyone who registered. So folks, if you have to leave early for class or, for whatever reason you need to step away, you will still get the recording. And we will also be sharing out the slides after the fact. And we will be trying to answer as many questions as we can as we go through. You will also get a certificate of participation for attending today. So with that, I think we can go ahead. We'll get started with our first iClicker question. And this one's just kind of a little warm-up round to make sure that everyone can use it. And this is optional if you can't get in or if you don't want to, no worries, but it is available for you. But if you could just let us know your name, your institution, and what you teach. So this will be delivered to either your browser or your phone, and you can just select your response. I like how whatever, you guys know what I mean. Right. And Ashley has dropped the join code link in the chat if you want to just click that. Another way to get in. And if you folks, I'm seeing in the Q&A that a few people are having trouble getting in. Hi, Jody from Oregon. I'm in Oregon too. I'm going to go back to the join code if you want to just try taking a picture of it if you're having trouble. All right, we've got 53 responses. Let's just take a peek. We've got some math, English, nursing, med students, like physics. Okay, chemistry. I love that we have all kinds of different disciplines represented today. This is intentionally meant to be cross-discipline. You'll see as we go that our speakers are from humanities and STEM, and that is very intentional because I want to make sure this applies to everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the question. Thank you for participating. Do not stress if you weren't able to answer that one. More questions are coming. So let's go ahead and start by hearing from Kristen.
All right, thank you, Leslie. So my name is Kristen Monroe. I teach at Landmark College, which is in Southern Vermont. Landmark exclusively serves neurodivergent students, and I'm going to talk about some of the insights that I've learned by working with these students. So you can go to the next slide. So I want to start off with a short answer iClicker question. How do you leverage technology to help students manage stress without increasing your workload? I want to hear from you about your own strategies.
And one thing I will add is that this is your opportunity to share ideas with other instructors. I collect all of these responses and then kind of synthesize them. I use AI. I will tell you about that later. Um, but I share this back out. So you have an opportunity to share maybe your little kernels of teaching wisdom with some other instructors right now. I'm gonna give you just about a minute. There are so many great suggestions in here. A lot of setting expectations, a lot of ways of giving students different modalities for responding to things. This is really wonderful.
That's awesome. Thank you all for sharing. So yeah, so we'll end it here. But don't worry, there will be more opportunities to engage. So you can go to the next slide. This is going to be a multiple choice question, although it might be good to do it as a multi-answer because I think some people might sort of be in between. Uh, so the question that I have, and you can click multiple ones, is how familiar are you with the term executive function challenges? Ranging at the top with A, never heard the term, all the way to I'm an expert on this term and can teach someone else. Hopefully I fall into E, you know, because I'm here, but I think so. And since this is multiple choice, we will, you know, take a little less time with this probably.
Looks like we have a pretty broad spread of experience with this.
Yeah, that's awesome. A lot of A's and B's, which is good. So there are multiple models for executive function. I'm going to talk about Brown's model, which was originally developed for students with ADHD. But what I found is that being introduced to this at Landmark has been a total game changer for me because it really helps me to better understand my students and put language to those moments where, you've all had the student where they've worked on something in front of you, or you talk to them and they clearly know what they're doing, but they're not turning in work, right? This can kind of help to remove the static that is happening so that you can see the image behind the screen. So, what's really nice about this model is you go from getting started. I always say that my students have a high activation energy, being a chemist, through the different places where they might get stuck. And so you can go to the next slide. I forgot to click through it a few times. I forgot to remove the animation. Sorry about that. So I was talking to my dad about executive function challenges. He's not an educator. And I said, where do you have executive function challenges? Because the thing is, they're not limited to individuals with disabilities. And so he gave me the example of making jewelry. He's made jewelry since he was in high school. So you can estimate my age and then figure out how old he is. And so he's really confident with the process of collecting rough rocks. He was just in Tucson nailing boxes of rocks back to our house. He's really confident with polishing stones. But when it gets to the finishing the product and doing the metal work, he's not as confident. And so he gets really frustrated easily because he wants it to be perfect. And so the ratio of rough stones and polished stones to completed products is very low. If he was being graded, he would not pass his classes, even though I'm biased, but the jewelry looks pretty good, right? And this is a non-academic example of executive functions challenges. And again, I want to emphasize that everyone has these. It's just they show up in different places. And a lot of it comes down to having uh, anxiety about going through different processes and going and completing different tasks. So the next iClicker question is, have you ever used or considered using AI to help students with tasks like brainstorming, organizing assignments, or studying?
You all have very clearly gotten the hang of this. You're answering so fast now. I appreciate it.
Interesting. So we've got a lot of people that are have used it or are curious. So that's good. And then a few skeptics, which is also good because it's not for everybody. It's a nice distribution again.
I'm gonna go ahead and close it. Thank you, everybody, for your responses.
All right. So I'm going to talk about a class that I taught. I've taught this class both in person and online. It's called The Magic of Chemistry. It's geared at non-science majors. There's no lab. And for the in-person class, it was 15 weeks. For the online class, it was 5 weeks. The overall goal of this class is to have students be able to turn on the television, see a popular culture reference that's not scientifically accurate, and have some more knowledge to be able to point out why it's scientifically inaccurate. So I thought it would be a fun final project to ask the students to pick any topic they want, any popular culture reference, and identify something that's scientifically inaccurate based upon the course content. This was easier said than done. Next slide. So I did traditional scaffolding. I gave them a mid-semester project planner uh, with questions, and then the goal was to have the final project. But what was interesting for the in-person class was that more than half of the students ended up going to the tutoring center to ask for help to choose a topic, which wasn't really even being assessed. And I intentionally left the instructions vague because I wanted the students to pick something that's authentic to them, not just, use the incredible Hulk and gamma radiation and because I suggested it. So I was really surprised that my students were having such trouble getting started and they really needed the tutoring support when it was an in-person class. They had access to similar tutoring online, but of course we know that there are barriers to that. And so I decided to use AI to help my online students with this assignment. Next slide. And so I went to AI and I used ChatGPT and I said, give me some prompts to answer this question that the students could use to get started with identifying topics. And I shared the prompts with the students because the thing is, you can't always tell the students it's okay to use AI and not give them suggestions for how to use AI. And so not every student did use it. I asked, you can go to the next slide. I asked them to, as part of their project planner, to describe how they use AI if they did. But the ones that did really benefited from having that option, and it alleviated the need to overcome the barrier of seeking out tutoring to identify topics. What was interesting about this project planner as well was that over the summer when I had the online class, there were 10 students. 3 out of 10 of the students didn't turn in the project planner on time. And, it's a little bit harder to reach out to students when they're online. I ended up pulling them into breakout rooms and asking them why they hadn't turned it in. And 2 out of those 3 said, oh, I couldn't find a second reference for the project planner. And so I didn't turn it in. And they didn't email me, they didn't communicate this to me at all. And the funny part was that it was a draft, so they could turn in something. But a lot of students have this perfectionist idea that I can't turn it in until it's done. They would rather get a 0 with no judgment than actually get a letter grade or get a numerical grade that is mathematically better. Even and so, emphasizing that it's a draft and asking students to share what they have is a really important piece of managing anxiety, and that can lower that barrier that anxiety can create so that you're actually capturing the students' real content knowledge instead of whatever they've actually turned in. Because we all know that grades don't always accurately reflect content knowledge. So, another thing that I do with students to manage anxiety is I use the flexible deadlines and automatic grading from Achieve for formative assessments. I have a suggested deadline, which is in line with the course content. 2 weeks after that, I put a placeholder 0 in the grade book. I always tell my students all grades are fake until the midterm. This is kind of a pseudo ungrading. So the students still get grades, but they're pretty flexible in terms of their grades. And then but assignments can still be submitted, and I really emphasize that. And then I have a mid-semester and end of semester cutoff because you need to have the mid-semester cutoff to have the realistic conversation about where a student stands in the class. And also sometimes students get so far behind they don't know where to start, so having that reset mid-semester can help them to kind of get back into the rhythm without having a whole ton of material. Next slide. In between these assessments, what I'll actually do is I give my students printouts of missing work. I used to call it my highlighter of doom, but now I call it the highlighter of hope. The students actually prefer highlighter of doom. But the idea is I will highlight anything that's missing and that they can still turn in, and I'll give that list to them. And having that physical list, paper can sometimes actually be really useful for them to work through the assignments because sometimes they just don't know what they're missing, or they need that extra guidance. And the last thing I want to share is just a way to design exams that can minimize anxiety. So we know that in-person exams can be hard, especially if students need extended time and different accommodations. And so I use a high flex model for my summative assessments. I give my students the option so it's all my exams are take-home exams to decrease anxiety and to give them the amount of time that they need to work through it. But I give them structured time in class to also complete the exam, because the downside to take-home exams is that students that have executive function challenges might struggle to actually activate and get it done, or with all of the other challenges with executive function challenges. Now, I know that there are integrity issues with giving students take-home exams. I found that lowering the stakes of the exam and giving them as much time as they need to complete it definitely minimizes cheating. And there are other ways to lower stakes of things. I don't give revisions for my exams, but I do create it in such a way where, and for the most part, I haven't noticed any cheating. And then I also write my test questions to really test critical thinking, show work, and really demonstrate that content knowledge. So I think that's my last slide.
Yep.
Right.
Kristen, thank you so much. We have some questions. I'm going to hold them until Julie has also spoken, and then we'll do a little Q&A session with both of you. So with that, thank you, and I'm going to hand it over to Julie.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you, Kristen, for those wonderful practical ideas for our classes. I am Julie Moore. I teach for Eastern University. I teach writing classes. I also advise students, and it's in an asynchronous program for adult learners. And so I say that because a lot of what I'll be talking about here will be about writing assignments, and sometimes we think, oh, all that, right, it's best done in person, but everything I'm sharing with you can also be done online and asynchronously, as I do these things in my asynchronous program. So I want to start, yes, Leslie, with an iClicker question. And that is just, what do you think resilience is? Is it a characteristic someone has? B, a healthy outlook on life? C, a dynamic process? D, all of the above?
There's a pretty clear winning answer here.
Yes, and that's really interesting because it's not D. This was a trick question, which our students hate, I know. And the problem with all of the above is actually the A answer there. So let's go to the next slide. We'll talk about how researchers and scholars in the field are now talking about resilience and how they're defining it. Earlier research by Martin and Marsh and many other scholars talked about resilience in terms of students having characteristics, and in particular, 5 characteristics. They called it the 5C model. So confidence, coordination, self-control, composure, and commitment. And they said, oh, if students have these traits, they're going to be resilient. But then even Martin and Marsh continued the research. They said, no, it's something more that, and they phrased that, they dubbed that academic buoyancy, that actually has also to do with students' ability to successfully deal with academic setbacks and challenges that are just typical of the ordinary course of school life. Well, as more researchers and scholars investigated it, far more have come along with this, what they call the conceptual model of well-being. And so they understand it's not just a trait someone does or doesn't have, or an ability someone does or doesn't have, but rather that right, none of us exists in a vacuum. We all exist in context. And amidst that academic context, we have positive inputs that maybe replenish what they refer to as this coping or resilience reservoir, or there are negative inputs that drain the coping reservoir. And it consists, yes, of personality traits and temperament and coping style, but also these inputs, the positive and negative inputs. And so they now most researchers and scholars look at resilience as a dynamic process. And just because a student lacks confidence, coordination, self-control, composure, and commitment, that doesn't mean they can't develop resilience, especially with positive inputs. So the next slide, we'll get into that. But since I am an English teacher, an English professor, I'd like to also ask this question of you. Those of you who do assign writing assignments, answer this question. When I give a writing assignment, I A, include it in the syllabus and give a due date, or B, write it on a whiteboard and discuss it in class, or C, distribute it separately from the syllabus and discuss it in class, or D, do everything in C above as well as break it down into manageable steps. I love watching how
It's fun to see the responses.
the chart goes.
Nobody writes it on the whiteboard, I guess.
What? One. We have one.
Okay.
Oh, there's an E. Well.
There's always going to be an E.
Well, I'm glad to see D. This was not a trick question this time. So D is a really great approach for helping students build resilience. Those of us who teach and have been in the composition and rhetoric field for a long time know all about the writing process. We want students to, really commit to the writing process and go deep into the writing process in order to learn how to write well. And so we value the writing process. We give points for the writing process. We want to encourage students not to write a paper the day before it's due and then turn it in. We want them to have a lengthy and deep writing process. But the other thing that's really, wonderful to know is that because resilience is also a dynamic process, emphasizing the writing process when you give writing assignments is then also going to help students develop resilience, especially with the positive inputs you can then add to the process. So although the writing process is never linear, we never just do pre-writing and then writing and rewriting and boom, we're done. It's recursive. We're pre-writing when we're writing, we're rewriting when we're writing, we're going back to pre-writing when we're rewriting. So we know that. But still, just for the sake of ease, there are lots of positive inputs that we can add to every stage of the writing process. And this list doesn't intend to be comprehensive, nor does it intend to communicate to you who are assigning writing that, oh, you have to do all of these things. No, these are just positive inputs you can consider adding to the writing process for your writing assignments. So for instance, in that initial stage, Kristen talked about students going to tutors for brainstorming. Actually, I was a writing center director for 20 years, and that's actually my writing center tutors used to love doing brainstorming sessions with students because it helped them to individualize the topics they wanted to choose based upon their interests, their major, whatever the case may be. So tutors could really delve into students' backgrounds for that. So that is a great way to get positive input into the writing process. But of course, they could use AI too. I put Claude there in parentheses just because that's kind of a favorite AI for those of us teaching English, but obviously ChatGPT is another one. And that's just the idea of, and I loved what Kristen said, you know, even showing students how to use AI to help them brainstorm, because some students will just type in, you know, the first sentence of the paper assignment and nothing else. And that may not be so helpful because the AI doesn't know all the requirements of the paper, for instance. But even things as traditional as outlining can be helps. That can be a place where you then add input. Hey, you know, do an outline, submit it for credit, kind of in an ungrading sense, because we just want them involved in the process. Submit it. As long as you do it, you get credit. But when you do it, you also get my feedback. So now I can give you some input to help you. Before, a lot of students think once they've written the draft, oh, it's in concrete and I don't want to change anything. It took too much work. So if you can catch them early on by looking at an outline or some type of, you know, pre-writing, mapping, brainstorming, anything like that, you can then add inputs. Same with the writing steps. You can add positive inputs by having peer check-ins, writing groups. Achieve has a wonderful system where you can have students submit multiple drafts and you can compare the drafts. Peer review can also be done on Achieve, and I've used it very successfully. That way you can do peer review even outside of class because it's all digital. And again, networks of support. The Writing Center can be there for students during the writing process as well. And of course, individualized conferences are a mainstay all the way back to Donald Murray's research 50 years ago. But a lot of professors maybe don't have time to do individualized conferences, or those like me who teach in asynchronous programs, individualized conferences may not be possible. But if you're in person or if you have the ability to do that, that's another way to add positive input. And then, of course, revision. A lot of students will skip revision because they, a lot of students say, I'm afraid, I don't know what to change. So giving some positive input there, again, with peer review workshops, which you can do on Achieve, and in a writing center, or even in conferences that you could conduct. So that is how we could help students become more resilient in terms of their dynamic resilience process, build that reservoir of resilience. Another thing to keep in mind, okay, when we give praise, we want to make it very specific. Some students see through shallow praise. Like if you have a list of 10 criticisms and then one piece of just vague praise, you know, good job. Some students may hang on to that good job and not hear the other 10 criticisms, or some students will focus so much on the 10 criticisms, it just reinforces what they think they've been told before. Oh, I'm a terrible writer. So the idea here is not to praise perfection, but instead to praise persistence and to make that praise specific. Don't underestimate the power of persistence and praising the persistence of students who keep trying and trying and trying. Yes, at the end of the day, we are going to grade the quality of the product, but by emphasizing the processing, even allotting process points for completions all along the way, that helps then to praise persistence as well. It's also helpful to keep in mind that anytime we grow, like when we were kids and we'd have growth spurts, right? It hurts. Sometimes our knees would hurt, our backs would hurt, because all of a sudden we went through a growth spurt. Well, sometimes growing hurts, and learning sometimes is painful because the answers aren't easy. You have to work, you have to sweat. And so praising that sweat, praising that persistence is a great way to help students build that reservoir of resilience. Next slide. We also want to encourage students to practice gratitude. That may seem strange, like, well, that doesn't have anything to do with my class. But when it comes to a writing class or any class that values writing, helping students to practice gratitude even in writing can be a way to help to develop their resilience. And there's quite a bit of research on the connection between practicing gratitude, and developing resilience. And even some of the 10 powerful ways to practice gratitude on this little meme here have to do with writing. One is, writing a positive review or thanking someone for changing your life, number 5. So writing letters of gratitude, starting a gratitude jar where they write out the things they're grateful for and put it in a jar, sharing their gratitude with their partner. Maybe that's verbal, but it could also be in writing. 8, starting a gratitude journal. Or 9, creating a gratitude wall, which I think could be really fun, where they use Post-it notes or maybe index cards with a tack, and they are literally putting on the wall, all over the wall, things they're grateful for. And you could think of creative ways to do this, where you ask students, maybe even in your own class, maybe you develop a gratitude wall, and ask students, hey, what are you grateful for in this class? Or what are you grateful for today? Or what are you grateful for in the dorms? Or whatever the case may be, to help them develop, again, that reservoir of resilience. And last but not least, as we help students develop resilience, pay attention to the physical. We often think of education in terms of being quite cerebral. We're in our brains, we're in our minds, we're thinking a lot, but we have bodies. We are not disembodied human beings. We are embodied human beings. And again, there is a lot of research on the high levels of anxiety and stress and their effects on the body, their effects on our students. So any tools we can give our students to help them relax, help them manage stress better, also then helps them develop that reservoir of resilience. One, and I thought we could practice it here as I add, is to do diaphragmatic breathing. And those of you who've ever done yoga are probably familiar with this, but I even had a doctor once years ago say, Julie, you breathe from your chest. So when you take a deep breath, your chest rises, and that shows you're breathing the wrong way. And I was like, what? And she explained to me, when you are born as a baby, all of us, we breathe through our diaphragms. We do not breathe from our chest. So this is worth teaching students to do. And this is an exercise you could do with students right before an exam, right before you give a writing assignment, maybe before a peer workshop, review workshop, just to help them breathe. And so you can start with your hand over your heart and the other over your stomach. And this is because, you know what? This doesn't come naturally to us once we learn how to breathe the wrong way. And then 2, you want to breathe through your nose, not through your mouth, and let the air fill your belly. So your belly should actually extend out. And notice how the hand of your belly moves while the one on your heart should stay still. And then you draw your belly button in toward your spine so that you're really thinking here of that as you exhale. And then 4, feel as the hand on your stomach retreats back. And 5, repeat this 3 to 5 times to start. So we could end here with a diaphragmatic breathing, all right? So, and I am not in any way any kind of yoga instructor, but we'll give it a shot. So hand on chest, hand on stomach, and breathe in through your nose and let the air fill your belly all the way. And then exhale through your nose. And as you're exhaling, right, draw your belly button in toward your spine. And this then is really effective breathing for eliminating stress and anxiety. And again, you repeat it 3 to 5 times, which we don't have time for. So last slide, just more about the physical. As you may have noticed on my first slide, I have a website. I'm a poet as well. And so I had to bring in a little bit of poetry to this. Remember that we are embodied human beings. Let's sing the body electric. Let's remember, as Walt Whitman said, we contain multitudes. And those who corrupt our own bodies, right, we end up concealing ourselves. And we want, right, the body and the soul are connected. So we want to pay attention to the body. So sometimes I joke with my students even and say, hey, I know I'm going to sound like a parent here, but are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating healthy? Because these things do also affect their resilience. But also just stretching, soothing tight muscles, we poets, we love to walk, and then we're writing poems in our heads as we're walking our dogs on long walks. So even just taking meditative walks can help with the writing process and build resilience. One of my colleagues even taught students, like as far as soothing tight muscles before exams, she would have students run their hand up and down their arms on each side, just to kind of loosen muscles and get blood flowing, and stretch their shoulders, and just then do some diaphragmatic breathing in order to help them relax before an exam. And all these things can help build resilience in your writers, in your classes.
Julie,
And
thank
I'll
you
give
so
it,
much. I know
yeah,
I feel readier for my day after taking a couple deep breaths. So I
yes.
really appreciate you guiding us through that. All right. For you in the audience, my friends, what are some things that you do to tackle stress and anxiety in your courses? And this will be a short answer, iClicker question. Go ahead and give you a minute to respond to that. And while you are doing that, we have a lot of really great questions. I don't know if we're going to get to them all today, but I will share these questions with Julie and Kristen after the fact. We'll answer as many as we can asynchronously if we do not get to them live. But let me go through and grab a couple while you all are sharing your ideas. This is a really interesting one. For both speakers, at my large state university, with the required material in our STEM classes, there has been no time carved out to teach students how to be students. In your opinion, whose job is it to teach them to be good students? Kristen, I see you came back on video for this one. Is there a risk? And you are still on mute. There you go.
Sorry, I had a student come to my door, so that was why I was off camera. So, it's funny. I think that the expectations for college professors are changing. And there are some places where there is we have to teach our students how to navigate our courses, right? Because one of the challenges is that uh, I know this to be true for learning management systems. You give a faculty member a Canvas shell, and then or you give 5 faculty members a Canvas shell, within 5 minutes, they all look different. And a student has to figure out all of those nuances. So especially as we're shifting more to online things, we have to take the time to show them how to access the course content. Because if they can't access the course content, they really shouldn't be penalized for not being able to do chemistry, right? So I think that there is a space for that. I would say that I would focus on teaching the students the ways to navigate your course, and also the skills that they will need, you being a subject matter expert in your field. So it doesn't have to be how to be a student across the college, but just the strategies that you use. One of the things with my flexible deadlines is a lot of students will still ask for extensions. And so I have to explain to the student, I'm like, well, you don't actually have to ask me for an extension, but they do have to ask. I'm pointing at my neighbor professor. They do have to ask her for extensions. So they have to get used to all of those different nuances. So I think that the more we can remind our students about those things, and it's also simple things like, reminding students you have office hours, and having a few announcement slides at the beginning of the class. Because the problem is that when you go through all of the material in the beginning, they can get lost. And they also aren't, if it's not in the moment when they need it, they're going to not know how to access it. So reminding them, throughout the semester, hey, by the way, I have office hours. Those can be little things you can do, which don't take away a huge piece of your time.
Julie, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, well, as a writing center director throughout, for 20 years, I taught a lot of writing across the curriculum classes, and I used to remind my colleagues the job of writing isn't the job of just one professor, the comp professor. It's the job of every professor. That's what writing across the curriculum is. And I would say the same thing applies with helping students learn how to become students. I know at the school, and I don't know if this is the case with Kristen, but the school I teach for, we have a lot of adult learners. So many come in maybe with an associate's degree, some may come in with some transfer credits, some are adults who are working full time, but they've never been to college and didn't take college prep courses in high school. So what we do is we have an introductory class that teaches them how to use, for instance, Brightspace and all the technology, and then teaches them various specific things that college students are required to know and do. But then, like, it's incumbent upon us as we help students go throughout the rest of that program to then continue to learn those skills. And I advise such students too. So my job as an advisor is also to walk alongside of them. So I do think it's everyone's job, because you could, even if you put all freshmen, say, in some kind of college this is how you do college class, right? Foundations of college education class or something. That class is only going to be as good as what students remember from it and apply well. So follow-up is key.
And if I may add one thing, in my role, I talk to tons of instructors all the time. And I was just at a conference last week and someone said something that really just like stuck in my brain. They said, we are not teaching the students we wish for. We are teaching the students who are in front of us. And it almost becomes a moot point of whose job it actually should have been. Maybe they should maybe have learned this stuff in high school, but the fact of the matter is they didn't. And so what do we do as instructors to address that discrepancy? And I think one thing that this professor recommended is making a lot of remedial material available to them. And there are tons of resources that we as publishers offer. There are tons of things on the internet, but giving them a vetted collection of things that are pertinent to your course material that will help them get up to speed. There are lots of questions to be asked and discussions to be had about activation energy, and are they actually going to do this? Do they know where they're strong? Sometimes there's quizzes that help identify their weak areas and their strength, but there's a lot of different options out there. But I think that one of the best things we can do is just kind of accept the reality of our current students. And this is actually a good segue into our activity. I will share the rest of these questions. We'll circle back to more if we have time, but I do want to make sure you get our activity together today. But one thing that we can do is give students some personalized coaching and help them build that reservoir of resilience that Julie was mentioning. And like I mentioned, I talk to a lot of people, and one thing I hear over and over and over again is that students are just struggling with fundamental skills, both interpersonal and academic, especially since coming back onto campus from COVID or coming back into a more hybrid environment. They just see a lot of struggle. And I think it's something that, like, we're instructors, we're teachers, right? You're here because you want to help them. So I'm going to be talking you through an activity that I hope will be a scalable way for you to give these students some personalized guidance and help create an environment where it's safe for them to try a little course correct. I'm not even going to say fail, but adjust and continue. I'm going to go ahead and stop this iClicker question. Wow, 80 of you shared responses. I can't wait to read these. I think they're going to be wonderful. I will be sharing these out with all of you as well. Okay. So I just wanted to make sure, I really like to connect the dots very, very clearly. So this personalized feedback helps build confidence. We know that that was one of the C's of resilience, right? Like, do they feel sure of themselves? Do they feel like they can do this activity successfully? I think one of the biggest causes of stress and anxiety when I talk to students is they don't know what's expected of them. They aren't super clear on what perhaps the end product should be or what a successful submission of an assignment might look like. I think another important thing is that it fosters this growth mindset where it's okay to try something, learn, adjust. In fact, that's how learning happens. If you don't try something, you can't take it on to the next step and learn more. It also gives them some emotional support. We talk a lot about they're scared, they feel isolated. And so the more that you can connect with them, the better. And I know that a lot of you have massive classes. Some of you have mentioned that in the Q&A. And so being able to do that in a way that scales is going to be really important. And lastly, it enhances engagement. We know that when students feel like someone on campus cares about them, whether it's a professor, a coach, an administrator, they're so much more likely to stay. And with stuff like this, you can be hopefully one of several, but if not several, you can be one of those people for that student. Okay, but not just any feedback is going to do that. It has some specific criteria. If you want to accomplish those goals with your students, your feedback needs to be clear and specific. You need to be very precise in what you are responding to. It needs to be balanced. It can't be purely critical. It can't be purely positive. Like Julie was saying, you know, they can lean one direction or the other of which side they hear. You need to make sure that you offer both. It needs to be actionable. You can't just say like, bad thesis statement. Maybe give them a little bit of coaching about like, let's revisit what's an area of your personal interest or what's a pop culture thing that you find interesting. Find a way to give them a little bit of guidance. We do want to make sure the tone is encouraging. It's motivational. If we want them to grow and be resilient, we need to help them along the way. The other really important thing, and this is where I think AI can come in super handy, is it needs to be timely. If they're working on this and they don't get feedback on it until a month after they've submitted it, they've already thought 10 million other things in between, and I'm not sure they will be able to pick up the momentum. So the faster you can turn it around while it's still fresh to them, the more impactful this will be. And lastly, it allows you, or it helps to customize to student needs. You can't just give like blanket feedback. You need to give things that are actually pertinent to them. So we are going to be creating our own AI assisted personalized feedback strategy. You are going to get some hands-on experience. I will be asking you to open up Claude or ChatGPT or Copilot or whichever one you like. Open it up. We're going to be playing in it together. We're going to have a framework for stress reducing feedback. I keep emphasizing stress reducing, encouraging. I think this is going to be really crucial to add that human element to the AI. You'll have some prompts that you can use in the future, and you'll have an action plan for implementation. So at the end of the day, I'm hoping that you will have a really fast, effective way to give your students meaningful feedback that will help them grow, that will help them feel less stressed and anxious. So you guys ready to go? Okay. All right. So the first thing you want to think about is pick an assignment that lends itself to this kind of feedback. I would say ideally, as both Kristen and Julie said, often there's a process and you want to give them this feedback before the final submission so that they can still act on it, learn from it, grow from it. So it might be a draft, it might be like stage 1 of a lab report before they go to stage 2 analysis or somewhere along the line where they are going to be able to take this feedback and do something with it. These are just a few examples from a variety of disciplines. As we saw at the beginning of the call, we have people from all over the world of academia. So I'm hoping that you can think of an assignment that you think could be could benefit from this kind of personalized feedback. And I'm actually going to ask you just a super quick iClicker question. It's going to be a short answer. Do you have an idea what kind of assignment do you think you might give personalized feedback on? And we'll give you just about a minute. Oh, I love that there's so many different stuff. An artist statement, a clinical case. Like you can see this applies really broadly. And this is something, I mean, I put it in here because I think every discipline can benefit from it. I hope you all find something that is pertinent to you in your course. Amazing. Oh, there's so many good ideas in here. Okay, let's go ahead then and get started. All right. This is a really important first question. Do you want to upload your student work into AI or not? There are pros and cons for both directions. If you do not want to mess with student privacy, if you have ethical concerns, there are ways to give personalized feedback that do not require you to put student information into any large language system. It's better for privacy. You can still identify common challenges. You can still support your lesson planning. The con of this is that it won't necessarily be as precisely personalized as if it was looking at their specific work. And it is still a bit more hand-holding on your end. Hopefully, it still lightens the load, but it's not going to be quite as efficient. If you are comfortable with uploading student work, this is one thing that I have discussed with a lot of professors. And for folks who do put student work into AI, they are very adamant that you have to disclose that to your students, and you can give them an opt-out option. So you can say, like, for this assignment, my plan to give you this special feedback that's going to be super great and actionable is I'm doing XYZ. I want you to be aware of that. If you choose to opt out, you can do that. So I do just want to flag that as an ethical concern if you are choosing to use student work in the AI. But the benefits of putting it directly in is that they get super specific, tailored feedback exactly to what they have submitted to you. It makes your grading way faster. It helps you see patterns of misunderstanding across the class. And it's faster. So give it a moment. Think, I'm actually curious. This one will make a multiple choice. Give me option A if you prefer not to upload student work, and give me option B if you are okay doing that with the caveat of disclosure to the students. This is so fascinating. I love watching it move. Okay, it looks like we're holding pretty steady with A as a leader, but a significant percentage of people who are willing to actually put it in there as well. So let's go ahead and talk about those two options. This is option A. And even if you are doing option B, if you have people who opt out, this might be a solution for you. So this is an example of an AI prompt that you can use. You can go ahead and open it up. Do this for real as we're here live. But I want to break down what is important about this prompt. I know that we have a pretty broad spectrum of comfort using AI in these webinars. Some people have never looked at it before. Some people should be here teaching it instead of me. But given that, I just want to point out a few things for the folks who are newer at it. As much context as you can front load, do it. That will make the output so much closer to what you want it to be on the first try. So you can see, I would recommend upload your actual assignment, upload your grading criteria or a rubric, upload a sample of your writing to students so that it can see your voice, upload an example of what a good student response might look like. That can be fake. It doesn't have to be real student data, but just so that it can see a sample of, like, I consider this an A paper. Look for this. So as much documentation as you have, as you want, put it in there. And then in your prompt itself, tell it who you are. Remember that the AI may or may not be trained on who you are, and you really want to give it that context. Otherwise, it might assume you're a high school teacher. It might spit out something that's not as relevant to you and your students. So I am a college level biology instructor, and I would like to create personalized feedback for this assignment. Based on all of this stuff that I've just given you, please identify common struggles that students might have and provide feedback for each struggle. So when I was testing this out, the way that the output appeared for me was, hey, I pretended I was a biology instructor doing a concept mapping activity. And it said students might have trouble remembering that evolution is woven through everything. It might have organizational, like structural problems. They might be unfamiliar with the idea of concept mapping and need support there. They might be nervous about it. And so it identified all of these different pitfalls. And then it wrote sample feedback for each of those problems. If you want a table, say so in your prompt. If you want, a letter, if you want bullet points, whatever output format you want, I just express that from the get-go. A couple things you can see I've bolded words in here that I think are important. That's the idea of identifying those common struggles. You definitely want it to do that. And I specified here, I said, look out for both academic and emotional barriers. And then this is really important too. Tell it that the kind of feedback that you are trying to give is intended to help growth. It's intended to build resilience. So you want it to be clear and specific, balanced, actionable, encouraging, and customized to the student needs. So I hope some of you are in there actually putting this in and getting some feedback and seeing what it looks like. But the idea is that as you go through, you have this bank of responses now, right? So the idea is that you could read a student paper, you could look at a concept map, whatever you're evaluating the assessment. You look at it, you see, okay, they hit pitfalls 3, 5, and 7. You could either grab those responses and drop them into the assignment or like jot them down, or you could say, okay, AI, I have a student who is struggling with 3, 5, and 7. Can you write one quick paragraph to this student, make sure it's encouraging, and it can give you a consolidated thing. So that is kind of option one of how you can get some personalized feedback in a faster, more scalable way. Otherwise, you know, you can only write, did you read the book? Did you come to class? So many times before your hand and heart start getting a little stiff. Okay, so this is the version where you do upload the student response. And the first steps you'll see really similar. You still want all of the same background documentation. You want your assignment, your rubric, examples, your own writing style if you want it to mimic your voice. And then again, we are specifying who we are, what we want to do. Based on this criteria, please review the student response and provide feedback. Again, this is the criteria for my feedback. And then you can just copy paste the anonymized student response right into the AI. I wouldn't in the AI like put their full name. Maybe don't do that. But you can drop the actual work in. And when I tested it doing that, it was able to respond really specifically to what the individual student said. So, okay, we've used some AI, we've gotten some outputs. Now what we want to do is a 3-step review. And this is something I tell anyone who's using AI, anyone who's teaching other people how to use AI. We never just take the output as it is. You always want to add a layer of your human expertise to it on the back end. So you get whatever the AI spits out, you can go back and forth with it. But this is a 3-step, just little checklist to make sure that you feel that this is appropriate to give to your students. So first off is, does it sound like me? If yes, cool. If not, if it's like very stilted formal language and you tend to be a lot more colloquial, tell it that. Be like, actually, I'm a lot more conversational with my students. Can you adjust? And it can do that. Is it specific and actionable? I'm really hammering this one home. You remember we put this in our initial instructions. We're just quadruple checking. This is one of the most important elements of making sure that that feedback helps support growth and resilience. So double check. And then the last question, will this reduce student stress? At the end of the day, is it helping them grow? Is it moving them forward? So ask yourself these 3 questions. If it checks the boxes, then you are ready to go ahead and give it to your student. So a couple more just quick tips. Put their names in the comments. This is such a simple, small thing, but it goes such a long way to building a sense of community, to helping the students feel seen and cared about. And we talked about this a lot, progress versus perfection. Acknowledge the progress. It can be a reference to a previous draft. It can be based on your personal knowledge of them, but make sure that you're looking at the process and invite further engagement. Like Kristen was saying, like invite them to come talk to you at office hours, send them to the writing center, give them a way to act on this. So I will reiterate, it does not replace your human judgment. It gives you tools And basically the way I think about it is, especially if you're doing the student upload version, it flags the areas that need your attention. So you are still, as the instructor, looking at those, the structure, the organization, the understanding of the topics, but it just makes it faster for you to say, like, these parts are all probably fine. This one needs my attention. Make sure that you review the output of your AI. And just remember that the more human and motivating your feedback is, the more likely your students are to persist, to feel less anxious. And I just really encourage you, open up AI and play with it. Someone said it's like surfing. You can read about surfing all day long. You're never going to get good until you stand on the board. And you don't have to use the end result for anything if you're not comfortable with it. But the best way to learn is just to go play with it and experiment with it yourself. So we are right at the top of the hour. Whatever, I'll ask this really fast. What did you think? For people who did actually follow along and create the prompt, what did you think of the end result? I'll give this one really fast because I know we're at time. And if you do need to leave, please feel free. Thank you so much for your time today. It has been a joy. I love these conversations. I love that I get to help you all connect the dots. When I'm doing my job at my best, it's me facilitating conversations amongst all of you. So it's an honor just to listen to you guys and learn from you. Okay. All right. I see we've got a spread, but some people who are willing to like give this a shot. I am really glad. Like I said, we will send out the recordings for you after the fact. And you will get the slide deck as well. So you'll get all of the wonderful PDFs and references. Julie, I loved all of your cited sources. We love to see it. So with that, go forth, have a wonderful rest of your day. And I hope you all can help those students mitigate some of that stress and anxiety, whether you're using AI or some of the other tactics that our wonderful instructors shared today. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much, everyone.